but I will say this. As much as I was saying about the trying to, this is the question, how do you read something? Well, obviously there's two types of reading. You can read a book and you can read it, well, there's three types really. You can read it in your head, where you hear a voice and you have a narrator which speaks to a part of your mind and you can hear the words being spoken. That's one way to read. You can read out loud, where you're actually speaking the words under your breath or saying them with full voice. 4 ways to read. Saying them with full voice. In which case you lose a lot of information and you put a lot of heaviness on it. Or you can read in the best way, which I found, where you're reading in your head, but you're basically speaking, you're translating, you're passing your head voice, which is speaking in English or whatever your native language is, into an intermediary language, which would probably sound something like Aramaic. It would probably sound a little bit more like Aramaic, and there's a colour to it as well. The colour's yellow and it's very smooth. And you find when you read in your head like that, you have a lot more of a clear picture of where you're supposed to be standing, because the key to any script, the key to any understanding any script is the blocking. Once you understand the blocking, everything else falls into place. There was an experience when I was doing As You Like It, and there was one scene. It was the scene where Rosalind and Orlando, where Orlando finally seals the deal in terms of committing to the love for the young Rosalind, basically Rosaline. And that scene we were finding it really difficult until we found the correct blocking for it, and then it fell into place. So oftentimes it's the actual blocking, but how do you get there quickly? If you're doing a 3-week rehearsal and you've got 2 weeks to perform it, how do you get there in time? Or you say, I'm going to say the line, I'm going to read the play every day. And you sit there, you're reading it out loud, you're saying all the words, and you're putting all your colours onto it and saying, this is going to be funny. And then you try to joke on the audience, but you're a milli or a microsecond off, your timing's a microsecond off, and you don't get the laugh you wanted. So it destroys your confidence and you end up backing off that text. I had another experience when I was doing a play called Warhorse, and there was one line that I didn't know how to play it. I just did not feel confident playing this line because I hadn't spent time with the play in my head. I hadn't spent time passing that language into Aramaic or into my Hebrew. Obviously, I don't know Aramaic. I don't know what it would have sounded like. I don't know Hebrew. I know a few words, but I don't know the whole language. But basically, there's an intermediary language, which is basically like machine code, which allows you to basically see what that character is doing according to the intention of God when he told the writer to write that particular play. When he put the writer under so much pressure that he said, Shakespeare said, I had to write King John, even though King John is very cleverly but lazily written. I'd say it's one of Shakespeare's laziest plays, which is why you don't see it often. Very lazy play. But it was an experiment to say, how casual can I make this text? That's why they're always saying, calling people devils and curs. It's lazy. Cursing is lazy. But yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Basically, there should be, when you're reading in your head, you shouldn't be hearing an English voice, your perfect voice, reading it back to you. And if you're doing an accent, it's a little bit tricky, but you should be able to learn an accent spiritually. That's where the best actors do it. They don't sit there and go, I didn't say this word right, because no one says every word right. Everyone has a particular voice which is unique to them, and it's going to change and shift depending on what they're doing. If you're singing, that's a different thing, because sometimes you have to train your voice to go higher and higher and higher. But I put the posit forward that having a strong sonic sensibility will help you overcome any challenge that you could do in the performance art space. So that's what I wanted to say. Look at these lights, these lights are incredible. Really lovely. Really incredible lights. Just one after the other. All circuited up. All connected into the big old circuits. These big old switchboards. It's just amazing when you think about it. But yeah, that's what we're saying. And you'll be able to see a veneer on the text. if you're reading in Aramaic or Hebrew, you're reading English in parsing Aramaic English into Aramaic or Hebrew. I'm not saying you have to learn it. It's a fake language. It's not a real language. It's how all languages were created, from a basis. They were created from algorithms. Those algorithms were at the first point, they were experimental until we got to Latin, and then we said, okay, we're going to pass everything from Latin. We can pass it from Latin, which is a little bit more rigid, but Hebrew is written very cursively. There's certain words that are very angular, and then there's other words which are very much cursive. Arabic is a cursive language, you know, so you have to find your place, you have to find what works for you. But I find that to actually find the blocking, you need a cursive language, you need a cursive text, unless you're doing something, you're basically playing a robot. Like you say, you were playing the first robot who learned how to walk. How are you going to learn that walk? You'd have to think like a robot, so you'd have to work out what language. You'd probably pass it from Latin. What language will be passed into which language when the machine that is allowing the robot to think, what language is being passed from what. I would use Aramaic because it's hypothetical. I would use Hebrew, I'd use Arabic, and pass it all back into English, and then pass it back into binary. So that's what I would do if I decided to become an actor again. But like I said, King John. So what I'm talking about is literally the plays. We've got Shakespeare here. We've got Henry the Sixth, Part 2. So how would you approach that? You've got to perform this play. You've got to perform this play in like 5 weeks. You've got 5 weeks to do this whole book. You know, 5 weeks to rehearse it and 2 weeks to perform it. You know, how do you even begin to get at any of that text without having a system? You can see what I'm talking about with the light. You see where that beam of light shining across it? You can almost see what I'm talking about, that yellow veneer, these kind of curvaceous looking bubbles on each one of those words. That's how you should be reading it, because if you're saying it out loud, you're going to come in with a prepared performance and it's going to be trash. Unless, of course, your character himself is somebody who prepares stuff before he does it. He like rehearses his interviews 2 days in advance, which some people do. But you have to work out, did it come from the text or was that cut and pasted on? And if it's cut and pasted on, it's probably going to be offensive to more than 50% of the people in the audience. So this is how you have to think if you want to become one of the best actors in the world. And also your face is important as well, your facial expressions. I was very lazy as an actor. I didn't move my face enough because I was very scared and drunk all the time. So for someone like me who's got a very full face, you actually need to activate. You need to find, that's why they're always asking about what animal would you be, you know. It's a kind of leonine, they call that. He's got thick lips. So yeah, that's where I'm at. But yeah, I'm going to keep on talking about this. But obviously, if I keep on talking about it, there's not going to be much work getting done. But on the left side, you can probably see what I was talking about the other day when I said that kind of looks like heaven. That little place where the green kind of silicone grid is interfering with that white sky with all the lasers flying across it. You see, because anyone can become the best actor in the world. They just have to have the right strategy. And usually you need a little bit more than 6 months. But this is the thing, they don't want to destroy like 17-year-old actors by coming and telling them to read everything in their head. They didn't tell me to do that. They just said, read the play many, many times. Read it every day. And I never figured out that eventually you'd lose your voice if you were to sit there reading an entire play a day. You'd lose your voice. So you've got to find out to read it in your head. But then you begin to listen to your English voice just talking to you in your head. There's no Hebrew there. There's no Aramaic there. There's no Latin there. You know, so what you're going to do? You need to be able to pass that language.